Running back is becoming the most underappreciated position in all of football. But make no mistake, if your team does not have a very functional runner of the football, you will not go far. Today, we're going to be ranking the top 5 running backs for the 2024 season. This is based largely on production, although there will be some other factors considered. We can get into little hypotheticals, if he was in this system, that system, the other, whatever. At the end of the day, putting up yards and scoring touchdowns is what being a running back is about, and we are going to reward the people who do that at the highest levels on this list. Starting things off, I've got Aaron Jones, who, if not for getting injured, will have been one of the most productive running backs in football last season. Got as an honorable mention. The thing holding Jones back, he's old, his health's not great, and partially due to his own inadequacies in terms of size, partially due to the Packers offense liking to throw to tight ends in the red zone, he doesn't get a ton of touchdowns. But great between the tackles, does not turn the ball over a ton, real threat out of the backfield, still very explosive, hard to get him on the ground, low contact balance point, can really shrug off most hits from anyone besides linebackers and defensive linemen. He is going to have a great season in Minnesota if he can stay on the field and healthy.
Well, Aaron Jones certainly has been a great running back over the course of his career. And I know you don't have him in the top 5, but there's an argument to be made he's not even a top 10 running back in the NFL. With all of the young talent that we have had enter the league over recent years, whether it be Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Brooks, who was just drafted, rookies that we have yet to see take the field. He's a little bit older. He's getting up there in age. There's a reason the Packers chose to move off of him and let him go to a division rival for not that much.
Well, to be fair, they didn't let him go to a division rival. They moved off him and then he decided to go to a division rival. It's a bit of a spiteful thing there.
Well, that is, but they had to know it was an option for him to go to a division rival. And if they truly valued him and viewed him as that top 10 running back, they would have extended him. But I appreciate
prefer Josh Jacobs and think Josh Jacobs is a top 10 running back, either or. Yeah,
I appreciate your fandom throwing him in our top 5 running backs video as an honorable mention. My honorable mention is one of the most electric rookies from last season. If we had a full 17-game sample size, I think he'd have an argument to be the best running back in the NFL just because of how absurd his statistical production was. Devon Achane, 7.8 yards a carry, 103 carries, 800 yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, and added over 200 yards receiving. Only played in 11 games, was banged up, dealt with injury. The numbers just jump off the page when you look at them. Another element to his success and why maybe you wouldn't put him in the top 5 or why people may look a little bit down on his production is that the Dolphin system is very friendly to running backs. I mean, we saw Raheem Mostert have the best season of his career last year, 21 total touchdowns, over 1,000 rushing yards. Didn't quite have the absurd 7.8 yards a carry, but I think it is. I just wanted to mention Achane, and I think he has the potential to be a top 5 and even approach top 3 running back in the NFL.
So I'm a homer when I put Aaron Jones, who I've had to watch destroy one of my favorite teams for the past 5-6 years, as an honorable mention. But you are not a delusional lunatic when you put Devon Achane as the 6th or 7th best running back in the NFL. No further comments needed. Moving on, getting into real rookie running backs who were productive, who belong on this list. I've got Jahmyr Gibbs at number 5. And the issue Gibbs is going to run into this year is he does not have firm control of the backfield. David Montgomery is still the Detroit Lions' first down back until something changes. Having said that, he's the most explosive running back I'm going to talk about today. He is probably the best out of the backfield, certainly one of the best out of the backfield in the receiving game. Amazing quickness. Really, this was a phenomenal pick by the Detroit Lions, which was not appreciated when it was made. Jahmyr Gibbs is great. He's got no injury history. He's young. He's a stud. He can run up the middle. He can go outside. Just doesn't quite have the ability to be a power back like David Montgomery does. But in terms of explosiveness, he's one of, if not the best in the NFL. And that is why he's my number 5.
He's a great player, and I actually have him higher on my list. And the one thing I'll mention about him right now before I elaborate on him later is that a lot of people are going to talk about, oh, David Montgomery, he's still the Lions' number 1 running back. He's going to take a significant amount of carries. Jahmyr Gibbs isn't going to have enough carries to maybe be a top 5 running back or be one of the best running backs in the NFL. And I would just like to point out that they kind of eased Jahmyr Gibbs into the season last year, and he still had 180 carries on the year. He still was a significant threat through the air. So I think we're not going to see kind of them ease him into the lineup, and I think he's going to take on a more dominant role.
I mean, I'll push back on that a little bit. You can say he takes on a large role. They might run the ball more on second and third down, throw more passes. At the end of the day, they're still going to have David Montgomery lining up in the backfield on first down, on the rushing down, more often than not. So that's going to hurt his production. I still think he's a great running back. He's the only running back I've got on this list who's going to see his production significantly lessened by another player in his backfield. I think he's that good, but to act like the production isn't going to take a hit because of Montgomery, it's a little silly.
At number 5, I have Bijan Robinson. Kind of last year, I think he disappointed some people because they had absurdly high, lofty expectations for a top 10 running back. They wanted him to take over the NFL, potentially have 2,000 scrimmage yards with his ability to catch the ball, with his ability to run in between the tackles, his ability to make people miss in open field. I mean, we saw him put defenders on highlight reels last season. And I think that kind of overshadows just how good he was last year. Still had 1,500 scrimmage yards, was very productive, dealt with the weirdness that was Arthur Smith's decisions when it comes to playing time, amongst other things. I think he's dynamic. I think he's going to have a great year with the Falcons, and I have him as the 5th best running back in the NFL.
Woefully low placement, pretty shameful, but I'll get into that later. My number 4, and this could go either way between him and 3, is Derrick Henry. And it's not his first time behind a good offensive line, but it's his first time in a while. And you can say, well, he's older, his legs are going to be a little bit less impactful. He's not going to be able to have those long 90-yard breakaway touchdown runs we saw early in his career in Tennessee. And to a certain extent, I agree with that. Running backs lose a little bit of pop in their legs as they get older. But the strength of Derrick Henry's game has never been his legs. It's his ability to make defenders miss or get them off him with his upper body. And if you watch the videos of him in the Ravens camp, in their facilities, that upper body is still looking pretty big. He can get through the line of scrimmage with a full head of steam, still can duck his shoulder, still can create distance with a stiff arm. And given the role the Baltimore Ravens are going to use him as, I think we are going to see a bit of a resurgence. Last year, somewhat pedestrian production for his lofty standards. This year, I think we're going to see him a lot more, particularly in the playoffs. We all know why the Baltimore Ravens lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. It's because they completely abandoned the run in the AFC Championship game. Derrick Henry is not going to let that happen. We are going to see him get 10, 15 plus carries every game as the regular season goes on. And once the playoffs start, you're going to start seeing him put up 20, 25, maybe even a 30 spot here or there by that Ravens offensive line. He is going to have a great season in Baltimore, revive his career, and might be enough to put the Ravens over the top.
I just can no longer put Derrick Henry as a top 5 running back in the NFL, and it's for a couple reasons. I don't think he's bad. It's not that I think he's not going to elevate the Ravens offense. I think he's very good. I'd have him just outside of the top 5, and I think he's going to bring the Ravens offense to a new level. But when we look at what he did with the Titans last year, it's the first time ever in his career we saw him take less than 300 carries in a season in which he was healthy, and it was the first time in his career another running back on his team got over 100 carries and was actually more efficient with those carries than he was. So I think it is fair to say he has taken a slight step back when it comes to what we've seen from Derrick Henry earlier in his career when he was having that 2,000-yard season and he was the best pure runner of the football in the NFL. And when we take a look at what he's going to do with the Ravens offense, and you look at how the Ravens have used running backs in the past, there's only one running back during the Lamar Jackson era to receive over 200 carries in a season, and that was Mark Ingram in 2019. Now, they haven't had a running back of Derrick Henry's caliber, but Lamar Jackson is going to take carries. I think the Ravens are going to want to preserve Derrick Henry a little bit throughout the course of the season. I don't think he's going to get his customary 300 plus carries. I think an optimistic number of attempts for him will be 250 carries, and he doesn't offer the same threat through the air that guys I have above him in the top 5 on my list.
So you're wrong about a lot of things there to not put him in your top 5. It's rather ridiculous. He still led the NFL in carries last year. Talking about, oh, well, his production went down. The production of every running back in the league comparatively has decreased over time. He was still the NFL's leading rusher in terms of attempts last season. Talk about, oh, well, his yards per carry went down, and the guys on his team were more efficient. Yeah, because everyone was keying in on Derrick Henry when he was on the field because he was the entirety of the Titans offense. I'm sorry, I like Will Levis as much as the next guy, but teams were not dropping too deep back in coverage to stop him and Diop from playing sweet chin music on their secondary. When Derrick Henry was on the field last year, he was getting the ball. He was not going to be an efficient runner under those circumstances with the line he had in front of him being as bad as it was. That's another thing you're not talking about. The Titans had a terrible offensive line from a run blocking standpoint last year. Besides Skoronski, they all stunk. There's a reason they used the 7th overall pick on J.C. Latham. The Ravens, much better offensive line. Arguably top 10 in the league. Certainly top 10 in terms of run blocking. You say 250 carries is a generous estimation. He might even have less than that. But those carries are going to be for 5 yards a carry. He is still going to be well over 1,000 rushing yards. And as he gets to the playoffs, those carries are going up. We are going to see someone with 1,200 yards in the regular season improve in the postseason from a production and an efficiency standpoint. Derrick Henry is undisputedly a top 5 running back in the NFL. To say he's not, even if you have him at 6, is ridiculous. It's disrespectful. It's disingenuous. You should be ashamed of yourself.
We know he doesn't offer the same thing as like a Bijan Robinson through the air, or who my number 4 running back is, Breece Hall, what he's able to do through the air. I mean, he had over 600 plus receiving yards, or is it 590? Close to 600 receiving yards last season. And other guys we both have above him on our lists offer more through the air and a more dynamic threat. Now, everything I said wasn't a justification that he's a bad running back, or I think he's taken some tremendous step backwards in his career. I still think he's a top 10 running back in the NFL. I think he is going to bring that Ravens offense where it needs to go. I just don't think we can call him a top 5 running back in the NFL anymore.
Yeah, you're completely wrong. I can call him a top 5 running back very easily. But before you keep disrespecting a potential future Hall of Famer, MVP candidate, former first-team All-Pro, future first-team All-Pro, how about you just talk about Breece Hall? Save the viewers a little bit of embarrassment.
And Breece Hall, what we saw from him in his rookie season before he tore his ACL, it was special. 5.8 yards a carry, was dominant on the ground, and then last year kind of took a step back. Maybe some of that was due to the fact that his injury recovery, getting back into game shape, a lot of it was due to the fact he had poor quarterback play and not so great offensive line play. So heading into this season, as long as his veteran talent is able to stay healthy, he has a much better offensive line. I think we're going to see that efficiency jump back up, and he's a dynamic threat. I mentioned it already, had close to 600 receiving yards last year, was just shy of 1,000 rushing yards. So I think he's going to be the key to the Jets offense, and he will be the reason, outside of having functional, potentially top 15 quarterback play, that the Jets are able to maybe make it to the playoffs.
A lot of optimism about those veterans the Jets brought in. The O-line's still not great. Tyron Smith helps with their bigger issues on that unit than left tackle. He's also got more running backs in the backfield. The Packers invested in that position in the draft. I think his volume might go down. The efficiency, sure, it could be there, but I just don't see him cracking the top 5. Definitely top 10, but I don't see him getting up to number 4. Certainly not above Derrick Henry. At number 3, I've got Christian McCaffrey, and this is where some of you balk at a placement and say, whoa, why does he have CMC all the way down at 3? And it's nothing against Christian McCaffrey. I just think he is going to be in a worse situation from a running back perspective than he was last year. Last year, no real other challengers in the backfield. Elijah Mitchell was hurt for stretches of the year. Even when he came back, was not a big contributor. Their offensive line firing on all cylinders when Trent Williams was on the field. They had enough weapons out wide between Kittle, Ayuk, Debo, where defenses could not key in on the run and stop it effectively. So he had a field day. Led the NFL in rushing yards, 2,000 yards from scrimmage. Great season. Offensive Player of the Year season. But I think the line's going to be a little bit worse. If Trent doesn't come back, it's going to be a lot worse, but he's missing time with his teammates. The fluidity of the offensive line is going to go down. Williams is getting a year older. His production might dip a little bit. And as we all know, Williams is the only thing keeping that line functional. Ayuk, I don't think he's going to be there. He is holding out. The 49ers are not willing to pay him. Completely different conversation on if he's worth it or not. But without him, people are going to be able to crowd that box a little bit more. Make it harder for him to sneak through the line of scrimmage. Suddenly there's one more linebacker in his way. And on top of that, Elijah Mitchell is healthy. Isaac Guerendo came out of Louisville, phenomenal talent. He is going to take over more on those short yardage plays. He's going to pound it up the middle, lose CMC some touchdowns. I think he just dips in production. He's not going to have another 2,000 yards from scrimmage season. Still a very good running back. Having him at 3 feels fair, but what's around him is worse, and that's going to drag CMC back down to earth.
Well, everything you mentioned has purely to do with his production and not anything to do with what he offers the 49ers offense or what he's capable of doing in the 49ers offense.
I mean, do we really need to write soliloquies about how good Christian McCaffrey is? I think the people watching this program have a pretty good idea of what Christian McCaffrey can do.
The only reason you could possibly have to put Christian McCaffrey this low on your list is you think he's going to get injured.
So the reasons I just named off don't exist. No, I think he's getting injured. I think he's in a worse situation and his production's going to dip. I think there are 2 better running backs than him this season.
It could dip a little bit, and he'll still be the best running back in the
You're
NFL.
wrong, and you should feel bad about yourself. Who's your number 3?
Anyway, my 3rd best running back in the NFL is Saquon Barkley, which some people will balk at because they'll look
Nice use of the word balk, by the way. I wonder where you got that from.
Over recent years, he spent his time banging his head against the wall, running behind a bad Giants offensive line with not that much talent around him. He did not have the most efficient stats in the world. He did not exactly put up 1,500-yard rushing seasons, 600, 700 yards receiving. He was not the dynamic player we saw him be as a rookie. But I think people need to take a look at the most productive seasons of his career. In his second year in the NFL, had over 1,000 yards, added another, 400 yards receiving, had 8 total touchdowns. In the year the Giants actually went to the playoffs, he had 1,500 scrimmage yards, I think
1,650 scrimmage yards and 10 touchdowns.
And in his rookie season, the best year of his career, led the NFL in scrimmage yards, had 15 total touchdowns, 720 receiving yards, 1,300 rushing yards. And there's one thing all 3 of those seasons have in common. He had competent quarterback play. In the year they actually went to the playoffs, it was Daniel Jones's the highest quarterback rating of his career. In his rookie season, when he had the best year of his career, he had the tail end of Eli Manning, which is better than anything Daniel Jones has ever shown as a passer. In his second year in the NFL, it was Daniel Jones's rookie season, which was the best year of his career outside of the year he went to the playoffs, and arguably a better year as a passer than the year they went to the playoffs, but did of course have all those turnovers. And in his rookie season, something he never had at any other point in his career, he had an elite receiving threat on the field in Odell to take some of the attention off of him. So I think when you look at those things and the circumstances around the most productive seasons he's ever had in his career, he has all of that and more with the Eagles. 2 elite receiving threats, a very good tight end, top 10 quarterback, an elite offensive line. He is set up to be, at the bare minimum, a top 3 running back in the NFL next season, albeit injury. And I don't think with the injuries he has had, he looked to be 100% last year in the games he was on the field. So I think he's my 3rd best running back in the NFL, and I think he's going to be at least top 3 next season.
Had to fight your way through that one a little bit. Clearly, you've not watched the amount of Saquon Barkley film I have, and that's okay. We'll get into him later. My number 2 is Bijan Robinson. You talked about his production compared to other guys. Every single running back you've listed, besides maybe Breece Hall so far, has had fewer yards from scrimmage last season than Bijan, despite him being limited thanks to Tyler Algier. It's nothing against Algier. Seems like a great running back. Had a 1,000-yard season once. Bijan is completely taking over that backfield with that new-look Falcons offense. There's no 2 ways around it. The only thing which might hinder him is the Falcons passing the ball more. But Kirk Cousins loves throwing checkdowns, particularly on 4th and 8 in close playoff games. But he will get the ball to Bijan in the air. Bijan is going to see his carries drastically ramp up, at least 250, maybe 300. He may lead the NFL in attempts this season. He's a young running back. He doesn't have the injury concerns someone like a Derrick Henry, a Christian McCaffrey, a Saquon Barkley does. The Falcons will lean on him time and time again. His production is going to be insane this year. If we're basing this purely off production, I would say he's the best running back in football next year. The goal line touches are going to go up. Algier is not going to be stealing his touchdowns anymore. From a fantasy standpoint, his receptions will be in the 50s at least. This is going to be a phenomenal offensive season from Bijan Robinson. He did not have a limited rookie season. Expectations were off, but close to 1,500 yards is still ridiculous for a rookie considering what was around him and how few touches he got. If you don't think he's going to be drastically better and a top 3 at bare minimum, I've got him at 2 running back, I think you're a little bit delusional.
I think he's going to certainly be better next season, but I think an element we're going to see the Falcons' offense change a little bit. I'd assume with Kirk Cousins throwing passes, or even if it's Michael Penix back there, they're going to push the ball down the field to his receivers more than they did with Desmond Ridder. He may be used in the pass game maybe a little bit less. I think his rushing production and carries are going to go up significantly, and I think he's going to be a great player. He's a dynamic player. He's the 5th best running back in the NFL. At number 2, I have a guy we mentioned already, Jahmyr Gibbs. He is a special talent, and last season, people are going to downplay his production, like I already said, because of David Montgomery and that element of him being in the backfield. But he had 180 carries last year. He averaged 5.2 yards a carry, just short of 1,000 rushing yards, was very productive through the air, and I think this is going to be a bold take for some. He's a better version of what Alvin Kamara has been through the course of his career. I think we're going to see those carries go up this season. I think the Lions eased him into the offense at the beginning of the year. I think he's going to go from 180 carries to closer to 220 carries. I think we're going to see those receiving yards approach closer to 600. I think we're going to see the rushing yards approach 1,200 to 1,300. And I think we're going to see Jahmyr Gibbs be the second best and one of the best running backs in the NFL next year.
Yeah, I've said it already. I'll say it again. He does not have control of that backfield on first down. Now, if you think the Lions are going to run the ball more, fine. I would push back on that by saying they just paid Jared Goff and they just paid Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're going to air it out at a slightly higher rate, in my opinion. Another issue, 9 times out of 10, if they are down near the goal line, Jahmyr Gibbs is not going to be in the game. David Montgomery gets the lion's share of goal line touches. He is going to be the one putting up touchdowns. So from a production standpoint, I just cannot justify Gibbs being this high. I think he's going to be better. I think he's going to have 1,500 yards from scrimmage. But when you've got another guy in your backfield who gets goal line touches, who's going to have 1,000 yards from scrimmage, can contribute out of the backfield in the air a little bit too, I just can't have him all the way up at 2. A bit fanciful. Having the Lions' offensive line in front of them certainly helps. They're the best in the NFL. They've got the best tackle in football besides Trent Williams. Interior's rock solid. That'll open up some lanes for you, but 2 is a bit too ambitious. He belongs at 5. But number 1, I've got Saquon Barkley. You may be skeptical about this. You're a Giants fan. You're probably a little bit bitter he is off in Philadelphia, living your dream of running behind a good offensive line like you wish you could have in New York. But I went back and watched every single touch of Saquon Barkley's 2023 season. If you believe the explosiveness is gone, even a little bit, you are mistaken. Saquon Barkley made business decision after business decision last year. There were countless times when he was in the open field and there was one man to beat. He opted to go out of bounds. He opted to take the contact. I'm serious. Go back and watch this film. The yards per carry took a hit because he'd be 10, 15 yards downfield, a safety would be bearing down on. Instead of fighting his way back inside and trying to extend the play a little bit more, he went out of bounds. He went down a little bit easier in the backfield when he had 3 defensive tackles breathing in his face. He would not fight for extra yards to the same extent he had previously. But on some plays, where he does cut loose, where he does go all out, he is still just as explosive. He runs a wheel route against Washington, I believe it was later in the season, and Daniel Jones overthrows him. He's locked in coverage with a safety and a linebacker. Saquon hits that extra burst of speed, extends, creates a separation between himself and the 2 defenders, and just runs away from him and catches the touchdown pass. He can still do it. He just didn't do it as much because he was preserving his body, preserving his health, as he should have. I would not put my body on the line for a team which was incapable of fielding a functional offensive line, who had a terrible quarterback they extended while playing hardball with me, the best running back in the NFL. I understand why Saquon was cautious. Now he is behind the Eagles' offensive line, who admittedly will be a little bit worse with Jason Kelce gone. But still phenomenal. Compared to what he was dealing with in New York, night and day difference. He's got elite receiving threats outside to distract from him. You cannot crowd the box against the Eagles. His efficiency going way up. We might see 5 yards a carry on 250 attempts. We might see a 500 receiving yard season in addition to a 1,500 rushing yard season. The only reason you can knock him down a peg on the Eagles is by saying, well, Philadelphia might not use him as much to try and save him for the playoffs. And hey, if you think they're going to do that, by all means, that's a valid criticism. But he is going to be the best running back in all of football next season.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to talk that badly about him. I have him as the third best running back in the NFL. The only things I'll push back on a bit is when I'm comparing him to a guy like Christian McCaffrey. I love Saquon Barkley. I've watched him play for my favorite team over the previous few seasons. And while I think he's often been wildly underrated as a receiving threat, he is not what Christian McCaffrey is out of the backfield. And there are some of those injury concerns with he constantly seems to pick up these nagging injuries. I mean, I've already said he's going to be more productive on the Eagles. I think he can be the engine to that offense, and he can open up a lot of things for A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Hurts as a runner. He's going to be better. If he isn't, I'll be shocked. But if I'm comparing him to a Jahmyr Gibbs, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is slightly more explosive. He has younger legs. He's earlier in his career.
And is about a quarter as powerful as Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley can truck somebody. Jahmyr Gibbs can't.
There's an element to that, but Jahmyr Gibbs, explosive, high-level threat as a receiving threat, playing behind a phenomenal offensive line, going to be great. And then you have Christian McCaffrey. There is a reason that Christian McCaffrey makes the money he does. There's no running back that comes close to the $19 million he makes on a per-year basis. The closest you're going to get to that is Alvin Kamara, who's $4 million away. After that, $5 million. And then after that, $6.5 million was Saquon Barkley. And the only thing you can really do to take away from Christian McCaffrey and maybe doubt what he's going to do is maybe you think he's going to get injured. The concern that we had a couple years ago.
So did you just ignore what I said?
That concern is completely out of the window. He had back-to-back 2 healthy seasons, phenomenal production in both years, 1,800 scrimmage yards, 2,000 scrimmage yards, has been great. And you said all that stuff about, oh, I think he's in a worse situation, yada, yada, yada. I don't really care about any of that. It hasn't changed all that drastically. He's still playing in one of the most talented offenses in the NFL. If everything you mentioned happens, he's still playing in an extremely talented offense with a top 5 offensive mind in the NFL that crafts the run game at an elite level, and he has a quarterback that manages the game at a high level and is a top 10 quarterback. So I think the concerns you mentioned are kind of dismissive of just how talented Christian McCaffrey is. He has the ability to run through you. He wins at a higher rate than any other running back in the NFL when it comes to stepping in at the receiver position or catching the ball out of the backfield. And I think he's the NFL's most dynamic threat.
You think he's the most dynamic, more dynamic than Tyreek Hill, more dynamic than Jahmyr Gibbs? You just
dynamic from a positional perspective.
Explosive. Come on now. Again, I don't think Christian McCaffrey is going to be a bad running back. I'm justifying him being the third most productive running back, or the third best running back next season. Frankly, I don't think Christian McCaffrey was the best running back in football the year before last year. I think he had the best season of his career last year. Maybe you want to talk about the 1,000 season in Carolina. I just point out he was the only target on that Panthers offense that year. But I think his production goes down while 2 guys see their production drastically increase to a point it eclipses McCaffrey's. It's nothing against CMC, but to say, oh, the system doesn't matter. The system is why he was doing what he was doing. Phenomenal running backs, given great systems, will almost always put up those types of numbers. Saquon Barkley is now fighting on an even playing field. Bijan Robinson is now fighting on an even playing field as Christian McCaffrey. So that's why I've got those 2 guys high.
Well, I think there's something you mentioned, Brandon Ayuk. You don't think he's going to be on the 49ers next year. They're going to rely on Christian McCaffrey more if Brandon Ayuk is not on the field. And as I've already stated, I think he's the most well-rounded and dynamic threat we have in the NFL from a positional flexibility perspective and the different ways he can attack you on the field.
So CMC had 340 touches last season. Given that the 49ers now have 2 running backs who, assuming Elijah Mitchell stays healthy, can take away touches from him, you think they are going to force-feed a guy who has had 2 season-ending injuries in his career more touches?
Clearly didn't worry him last season.
Okay, that's a stupid logic you're trying to admit. Oh, well, since he was healthy last season, let's go ahead and give him 400 touches. Let's see what happens. You don't think Kyle Shanahan, a top 5 offensive mind, is going to say, well, yeah, we'll give it to him a little bit more, but we've got these other guys, we've got these other weapons, maybe we throw it to other people, maybe we throw it to Pearsall. I'm just saying, it's ridiculous to assume the guy who led the NFL in touches is going to see a drastic increase in production because Ayuk is gone. If anything, the other receiving threats on the team are going to see that increase, not CMC.
I see the argument. I'm just not on board with it.
Well, that's fine. You can go hop off, get your little Turkish life vest, and float on away. Those were our top 5 running backs out of the 2024 NFL season. Let us know what we missed in the comment section. Have we forgotten some star player who you have as your number 1 fantasy sleeper you're drafting in the 8th round who's going to carry you to a championship? Let us know. Is someone going to run for 2,000 yards who we didn't name on this list? Tell us in the comments. If you're still here, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.